This is an interesting one because obviously we have to acknowledge the truth that there are businesses that don't generate enough revenue and don't have the margin to cover your bookkeeping fee at an annual basis. You know what I like about that? That means there are, and they're easily measured. The difficult problem you're having is how does someone justify an expense when at its core, you're probably going to point out a lot of the things that they're doing wrong. Wow, spent way more on food than you can actually write off. They didn't know that. You just removed their ability to spend free lunches. How dare you? You've actually hurt themselves right there. This is a fact. You are the adulting. And the secondarily, to me, you don't sell. You describe what you do. And I think you can really, I like to aggregate it over a year because you're already using flat fee. So the math is very simple. You know a lot. If you sat down for a little bit, you probably know the companies that generate X amount of revenue on year on average and margin. When you're talking with them, display that expertise, even if it's 5 months old, 5 minutes old, or 5 months old, saying, listen, I understand a company of yours that on average only generates $200K a year. If they're lucky, they make it out with maybe a 15% cash flow. How can I expect you to take 3% of your profit on bookkeeping? It's a valid question because now you're taking it to a new measurement. You're removing it from however they're thinking about it, and you trying to sell them on how it's a good idea, and you're actually giving them something to weigh without selling them on you. You're kind of enlightening them, and I think that's a big one. And I mean, honestly, because I buy a lot of local manufacturing businesses, the amount of times I rip out my hair because I'm looking at operating expenses and COGS, and this guy has no idea. Like, this business isn't 20 years old, and the valuation is horrendous. That's all bookkeeping. It's incredibly important, and they don't realize that. And honestly, an accountant doesn't care. An accountant gives 0 Fs if your bookkeeping is inaccurate. That's why they're accountants. They account for your books.
And they do journal entries to correct stuff, not actually go correct stuff. That's a
Well, they don't always correct it, though, either.
No, that too, yeah.
Liability. Huge liability when they touch it. So now, instead of trying to sell them on the importance of why they need a bookkeeper, really display to them what the world is outside of them. Business owners don't know accounting and they don't know bookkeeping. They know business, whatever it is. That's it, and that's why you guys are accountants, and now you're trying to be business owners, and you're like, holy crap, I know how to account, but how do I start a business? They're not the same thing, and I think you can really bring that novelty, but don't really sell. Address the fact that they don't actually know what their margins are. Factually you cannot get accurate taxes. Your bookkeeping is inaccurate. As a real estate investor, the bookkeeping and the amount of VAs I've had to pay and train because bookkeeping, I'll blow my brains out. It's too boring for my ADD. I just won't do it, and I'll just not let me taxes. But I like identification. I don't like, why guess what we could know? At the end of the year, why are we arguing over opinions on our business? Go hire a bookkeeper so we can argue on the best way to move forward. There's a lot of innate values to the information a bookkeeper really provides. If it's do it with war. Dude, we're your telescope. You can see further out into the war knowing where you're at. How do you know 6 months down the line you're not going to be negative cash flowing? You don't have accurate books to review. So there's a lot of different cuts that you can establish where the value is innate, whether they can afford the margin. That's why I would attack that in the beginning. Just address, this is the revenue, this is the average margin. They probably won't even know what their margin is. They just know they have a good income, and God knows if you looked at their taxes, how they claimed that. But this is a great way to educate people in a non-salesy way. And then, how do I even know you really want a bookkeeper?
Right. I think those are really great questions. I'm a fractional CFO. And so most businesses don't know what a CFO is or feel like they can't hire a CFO, which is completely inaccurate. And so what I like to say is I'm a trusted accounting advisor. So you are more than a bookkeeper. The bookkeeper is the transactional side. Like Sandy presents like 3 different sides of what she does. And part of it is that you could call it a client advisory services. Like in the CPA world, they call it client advisory services, but you don't have to say advisory. So you can, and those can be as simple as a cash flow statement that they can be looking at on a regular basis. And do they know what their burn rate is? I mean, that's super important for them. Those are small things that you can start with. So, but those are advisory type services. You become that trusted advisor. And by product, and I know Sandy's experienced this, you also become their therapist. you also become,
I'm already
it
there.
happens, right,
And-
3 clients in and I'm already there.
But, part of like, in a CFO, and this is something that the CPAs don't realize, is there's the whole side that's the finance and accounting side, right? And I usually help manage the bookkeeper as well. It may not be someone I hired, but I help to manage them. That there's the leadership and the management side, and that's where they don't provide that. But someone like Sandy and yourself, you have that experience, that you're able to help them navigate through a lot of those types of being a CEO of a business rather than a business owner with a job. Because if they can't get themselves, if they can't get out of the weeds, then they can't start looking at things differently, understanding where their, opportunities are. And so, like when I start with somebody, I have a questionnaire that I start with, but I wonder if, like with you guys, ever have, like maybe when you go to have a strategic meeting or, a discovery call, that you might have 3 or 4 questions. And one of them is the one that I have is like, what are you looking for from me? Which is kind of addresses what Tristan was saying before. Try to figure out what it is they think they need. So the pain point is really what you're trying to address in your first couple of months. And so if you can help with that, then you become that trusted advisor, automatically. So like a lot of people will go in and say, I know all this stuff and I'm going to show you what to do and all these great reports and all this. And it's like, you can't do that in the beginning. You have to baby steps. You have to help them. And it's almost always cash, right? It's almost always cash. They know that they have sales. They know they have nothing in the bank. But yet, what happened to all their money? Well, they overspent, they took out draws, or it's sitting in accounts receivable. Or, the worst case is someone embezzled it, but that's gross. But I mean, and that alone, helping them to be able to sleep at night and know that, and a burn rate, knowing, do you have enough to make it to the next month? Like I had one client who all she had to do to change her cash flow was she had a lot of people that had just regular clerical type jobs. And then she had like management people. I said, so pay them on a different schedule. Pay 1 week for one group, 1 week for the other. And then you can match your incoming, revenue coming in and learning and teaching them how to manage from a cash basis and not always from an accrual basis. That is really important. Wow. Don't even try to explain accruals.
Oh, yeah.
Right, Sandy? I'm like, don't even go there.
Well,
I mean, it is the world's simplest concept that they cannot get.
I know, but sometimes they ask that question, especially if you're doing the books on accrual and then the tax returns on cash basis. It's like, what's going on here? So I have to explain it to them so they understand. Yeah, I try to.
Exactly. I know. It's a.
I kind of give them the accrual kind of gives you a better idea of the overall, and then the cash basis is your day to day. People seem to understand that a little bit.
Because that's what you have to work with.
Yeah.
That's what you really have to manage. The other is just giving you what you've sold, but not necessarily what you've collected, and what you owe, but not necessarily paid. Those are the only differences. So your balance sheet on a cash basis is not going to have AR or AP. It's just not going to be there. Right. So, but there's sales tax. And Kristen has a comment. Tristan? You're on mute. Oh, there you go. Sorry.
I find in many conversations with the business owner, they hear a new thing about their business and their curiosity is unfettered, but it's there and they don't want to kind of move forward in the conversation. I'm not saying don't explain accrual. I'm merely saying there are many times where that is a distraction from your limited amount of time. I love this sentence. Wow, it sounds like you really want to learn this thing very deeply. I make it feel like this is going to be a lot more work than just you get to say 5 words and now I need to give you a college education on a very specific term. And then in my CRM, I tag them interested in this. I've got about 17 tags now that I've got different email chains. I love giving information. I'm not going to teach you live. It's not going to be the best information. It's going to be off the cuff. I wrote it down. I emailed them that. And I cannot tell you how many people I've had call me a couple days later. Hey, man, this was so helpful. Thank you. I really appreciate you giving me that. But here's the thing. My goal is to not waste my time. I need to get from A to B in this conversation. You're going to get distracted when we're off the add value later on. And it's scalable. Literally, if it takes you 2 minutes and you say it 1,000 times, absolutely not. I'll say a sentence in 5 seconds. They'll opt out of going into this deep woods And then I'll email them and they'll love the journey that they can choose their own adventure. So like, I don't want to do it for them live. I don't want them to control the situation, but I don't want to necessarily hold anything back from them either. And that's kind of how I like can join them. Anytime I don't want to talk about something, I just make it sound like it's going to take a while and it's dry. Like, and just, it seems like this is really important to you. It's not really important to them. They're curious. So I'm actively labeling the wrong emotions so they can say no. They have the freedom to say no. And then you actually have the freedom to move forward. The goal is to get them to say no. You want them to say no because one, they're taking control. They have autonomy. Anytime your kid walks up to you and they ask a question, you say no before you heard it. This is a fact about us. Give that no to them. They'll feel released and you'll still be following up with them. You know how many people have hired me because I wouldn't tell them something in a meeting because it was dry, and then they got their education through an email because I was just quickly put a tag on so I didn't forget, because if you do forget the tag, the system don't work. That's just my advice. It's so easy to get in the weeds with accounting, and a lot of entrepreneurs have ADD. They will think it's important and they will waste your time and never do anything with it. It's important to, you want to keep the upper hand, and the best way to be the expert is to not allow them to drive the car. I hired you, and yet you're letting me tell you where to go turns because you're worried that it will make me mad. Seems like, just label it and get them to say no. Make it heavier, make it big, make it seem boring. Do anything, because it's not what we're talking about right now. It's a disco ball. It's just sparkly for a second. It'll go away if you don't feed them.
And frequently, when you have those FAQs that you keep answering over and over, I'll make a Loom video that I can just shoot to them. And that's nice because they won't retain everything. And so this way they can look at it over and know, what did I miss say? Or what was I about that? They don't have to take notes. They can just watch it, and people are very visual. So I think that's a good way to communicate.